Kozyrov has unique insight into the Kremlin leadership. He served as the Russian Federation's first foreign minister in the 1990s. His memoir is called The Firebird, The Elusive Fate of Russian Democracy. Welcome back to the program, Foreign Minister. And I just wonder your reaction to what President Putin actually didn't say today on the platform.
He demonstrated, I think, two important things. One is that he is in his right mind in very primitive sense, that he is not mad, because he did not announce anything which would undermine further his stance in Russia. So he is very rational actor, and he will never press a nuclear button. That is why it is important. And the West should not be timid in its response. Number two is that he engages in latent and mind-boggling propaganda and distortion of the reality. He tries to sell his aggression, which reminds very much of the Nazi aggression during the Second World War, which cost 24 million lives in Russia. That included, of course, Ukraine, which was occupied. And now he tries to occupy Ukraine under this pretext, which is repulsive, and it's blasphemy towards the sacred memory of that Allied victory, where Ukraine fought against a real Nazi, and now it has to fight against the Putin's regime.
So let me ask you, because I'm really interested in what you said, because as a Russian and as a former minister, you're saying that what Putin did was address the Russian people. He said or did nothing that could compromise himself and his battlefield action with his own people. One of the things that you wrote before this parade was that you hoped no foreign dignitary would be there so that Russian people on their television could see that fact and ask themselves why. And of course, no foreign dignitary was there. Do you really think that will impact the Russian people? And what might they be thinking about this current war or special military operation, as they're told it is?
Yes, of course. You know, I'm thinking of anything which could penetrate the Iron Curtain of the propaganda. The Russian people, a large part of Russian people, are still watching the TV, and TV is totally controlled by the government. And that presents totally distorted picture for them. But I know that millions of people, like my humble self, I always like to see this parade, because it is a victory of the Allied forces over Nazis, the main probably success in the whole Russian history, and Ukraine and Russia contributed a lot. So people are watching, and every year, notably, the commentators would make an issue that there are many diplomats, many dignitaries, and counting those heads of states and everything, you know. So, and once President Clinton was at the ceremony, I kind of transmitted to him invitation and explained how important it would be if he came to the Red Square to support a democratic government in Russia at that time. So, and he did. So, you know, people are noticing those things, I'm sure, and that would probably penetrate to their minds that, you know, something wrong this time, because they have totally distorted picture of the whole situation.
That's really very, very interesting. I want to pick up on another thing you just told me. Because of what he said and how he said, you said the West should not be timid now. And you said very clearly that he will not, President Putin, ever push the nuclear button. when you say not be timid, what exactly do you mean? Because it does look like the West is actually, amping up its support for Ukraine in this fight.
Yes, but there are many voices, not necessarily from the top of administration. I applaud the Secretary of Defense who kind of defined very clearly and correctly, to my mind, the end game, which is to weaken Russia to the extent that it could not attack again Ukraine or any other neighbor country. That is the end game. But it is not that Putin would be in the corner and he loses his mind or whatever of anger or despair. No, he's sitting in Kremlin. He's enjoying life. He's not fighting there. It's not his children who are dying there, and his children probably are in Switzerland or somewhere else. And, he's rational as a game. Rational, like 2 + 2 = 4.
Okay.
It does not mean that he is smart, but he is rational. And a rational guy who likes the life, he will not start the nuclear suicide. Don't confuse a bad kabuki dancer with a kamikaze. These are two different things.
Well, that is very colorfully put, Foreign Minister. I'm sure many people will draw a lot of comfort from your assurances in that regard. But I want to ask you, what is it going to take then? I mean, you say he's comfortable, he's not suffering, his children are not dying, etc., etc. What will it take to end this then? Because there does not seem to be a huge amount of extra successful progress on the battlefield, even in the so-called revamped deployment in the East. After the UN Secretary General visited, the Financial Times pretty much assessed that Vladimir Putin has lost interest in diplomatic efforts to end this war, appears set on seizing as much territory as possible, according to sources briefed on conversations with President Putin.
He will find his interest in diplomacy when he is beaten there, when his forces are beaten there. And the only response today is not diplomacy, is not off-ramp searching for him, but it's $33 billion which President Biden proposed and should be, I hope, voted for very, very soon. And that's where the whole thing will be decided. But he will then withdraw if he is beaten. He will withdraw, and his propaganda will present it as a great victory. Believe me, just take my word on that, because the propaganda there presents everything as his success. He ruined Russian economy before this aggression in Ukraine. The Russian economy is underdeveloped. It was stagnating for last at least decade, and still he is a great economist, and some people even in the United States say that he is a genius. I mean, if he is a genius, then okay. So don't worry, he will be okay, but he should be beaten and he will withdraw the army, because there are already a lot of reports, and it should be that way, that young people there don't want to die for unclear and absurd and if not criminal.
Do you think then, do you think that's why he didn't call for a formal war and mass mobilization, because it would have created a backlash?
Of course, there are reports that there are already about 10 commissions, which are set around the country for drafting, for new drafts to the army. But people are starting throwing a Molotov cocktails into those offices, because they don't want to die in this. One thing is to watch TV, like they do, many of them, and kind of feel great. But the other thing, when you when you are 20, 30 years, or your son is going there, I mean, people could be disoriented, people could be brainwashed, but they cannot be brainwashed to the extent of not understanding that their own son could die.
Okay.
Will die for nothing.
Okay, so what do you make of, and again, CNN is reporting, it's anecdotal reporting, that the senior defense officials are telling them that they have received even more reports of a lack of morale amongst even mid-level commanders now currently in the Donbass, a lack of ability to push forward, bad weather, bad mud and all the rest of it, but also a lack of morale, refusing orders or being deliberately slow to follow orders to move forward. Does that sound credible?
Absolutely. That sounds credible, and that sounds logical, and that sounds understandable. So that happened. It is not first time something like this happening in Russian history. Remember World War I, when Tsar engaged in the war, and then the army, 10 millions at that time, they were in 3 years so tired, and they started to understand that it was wrong. It was not Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks were a handful of people, but the rest of the army didn't want to continue senseless and bloody war, especially with the corruption back home. And that's the same situation. And the end of this might be also very similar, like the generals, a group of generals at that time, 100 years ago, came to Tsar and forced him or persuaded him, whatever it is, to abdicate. So that might be the end of the story. I mean, some generals, patriotic generals, there are definitely patriotic generals, they will first stop from pressing the nuclear button because they don't want their families to be burned. And they might one day probably come to somewhere and tell somebody that enough is enough. So, I mean, there are more than one off-ramp for that, but leave it to Russians to do it. What is important for outside world is to help Ukraine to win all their territory back. That will be the real outcome, and that would prevent this happening every year or every 3 years or every month, actually, because if he is not beaten, if they are not stopped by force, they don't understand any other language, and they will be back, even to Poland. I mean, the worst case for provoking Putin is to be weak to him.
Let me ask you one final question shortly. You know, and you've read that there is now a movement by President Biden to stop his intelligence leaking. In other words, all this stuff that's now been in the press, which is really detailed stuff, they're not happy with it, apparently, the administration. They think it might provoke Putin and escalate. What is your assessment of that?
Well, you know, I think that leaking is a wrong thing in any government, especially in a democratically elected government, and that's wrong. But targeting is correct. So if American, the Pentagon helps to target, I would applaud that because it's definitely needed to help Ukrainians to target. Why? Russians invading an independent country, which is international crime. They could target and America or NATO, for that matter, or whoever else, by request of the legal government, elected president, cannot help targeting. But again, leaking is wrong, and maybe talking about all these nice things is probably that's questionable, whether you should tell everything publicly or not.
Right.
I don't think you have.
Right.
But to target, definitely.
All right. Former Foreign Minister Andrei Kozyrov from Washington, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this day. Thank you.